Okay, this is going to be our second video dealing with James Joyce's short story, The Dead. All right, so we covered most of the first section of the story in the last video. So we're going to look at the key moments in the second part of the story. And again, as usual, I'll try to keep this video to approximately 1 hour, and we will proceed by drawing on the text itself, which I'm going to call up now, and we'll go through it with a close reading. Again, much of this we will have covered in class to some degree. This is going to allow us to have greater depth in our analysis of these passages and the general themes that are being developed at this stage of the story. All right, so let's bring it up. Okay. So a key, I mean, all parts of the story, that there is a lot going on, as we know. I, again, don't have time to cover everything, but I will look at, again, the key moments that I obviously want to draw your attention to, but also to continue with exploring the means by which we want to read any short story, and particularly with James Joyce, whose subtle and nuanced way of unveiling the themes and the way it progresses as we work towards the third part of the story, where we will see a shift of sorts, and that ultimately will lead to the final epiphany that Gabriel experiences. So what really stands out in this, certainly the first part of this story, is the encounter with Miss Ivers, all right? And as we discussed, Miss Ivers, unlike the other guests at the party, is very much technically on par with Gabriel in terms of education, in terms of concern with culture, and so on, right? They've known each other. They are both teachers, both intellectuals, both concerned with culture, certainly in a much more attentive way than we sense from the other characters at the party in the story. This encounter becomes essential for understanding and fully realizing Gabriel's insistence on looking to the outside to find direction and purpose, both as an individual and in terms of his cultural development. I remember back with the galoshes, right? Why are the galoshes here? The galoshes, because they're what everyone is wearing on the continent. Right? Gabriel's interest and concern with things outside of Ireland, very much suggesting that his attitude is that Ireland has nothing to offer in terms of this development that he sees himself working towards. We also want to remember the encounter with Lily that happens very early on in the story. It reveals to us Gabriel's unease, right, in dealing with women, and we're going to see another encounter with a woman here, and even on a broader level, not just this relationship with women, but his relationship with anyone when the discussion or elements of the encounter are not under his control, right? Remember with Lily, he asks for him an innocent question. Oh, so when, I guess we'll expect you, we're getting married soon. Her response having seemingly nothing to do with Gabriel, right? She has an angry response in relating to her own personal experiences with a boyfriend of sorts, and she's bitter. But of course, Gabriel wasn't entering into that conversation anticipating anything remotely bitter in her response. When it comes, he doesn't know how to handle it. He needs to brush it off, give her money, and run away. It's not going his way. He doesn't have control over the situation. All right? It seems like a very small moment, but it's a short story, and it's James Joyce. And every moment is packed with meaning, right? And remember how we discussed in class, it's a building process to helping us have a greater understanding of who Gabriel is, which is essential in order for us to appreciate what he experiences at the end of the story. We learn a lot here in this encounter with Miss Ivers. So let's look at it closely. He's partnered for the dance with Miss Ivers, all right? And we're told, we learn about who she is here, right? She was a frank-mannered, talkative young lady. Frank-mannered. She doesn't hold back. She speaks her mind. Note as well that there's a large brooch which was fixed in the front of her collar bore, on it an Irish device and motto. Okay, this brooch is symbolically representing Ireland. It also indicates to us, prepares us for her, which will be revealed in this encounter, her engagement and belief in the necessity of such an engagement with Ireland, unlike Gabriel, who is looking outside, dismissing what Ireland has to offer. Miss Ivers very much believes that Ireland has much to offer for the Irish people. This circles back to this period of time that this party is taking place. And remember, this is a microcosmic view of the Irish society as a whole, as being commented on by the story. And it's a time of stagnation and paralysis, right? Remember, with the demise of Charles Parnell and the way that curtailed the home rule movement for independence. And at this stage, the story is giving us a view of a very, very much a paralyzed Irish society. And this is one of the things that Gabriel is critical of. Nothing is happening here. There's nothing here to give purpose and drive. And what we're getting from Miss Ivers is saying, no, it is here, but you have to seek it. It's not going to come to you, right? She's offering a way to pursue those cultural ideas and forward-looking progressive ideas, the galoshes, but that it doesn't have to be found outside of Ireland. Ireland for her is not this backward society that Gabriel seems to think it is, right? And it's very much a commentary on the attitude that Gabriel has, that you can't run away. As he ran away from Lily, because it wasn't easy. He runs away from Ireland because in order to find what you're looking for in your own homeland, within yourself, right? Remember, we talked about how there's the inward turn towards Ireland, which is mirrored by the inward turn towards the self, to know Ireland, what Ireland actually has to offer, and for the individual, Gabriel, to turn within to fully realize and recognize who he is and what he has to offer. All right, that comes, much more evident and much more important as we get to the end of the story. Sorry. All right. So they're dancing. When they had taken their places, she said abruptly, all right, remember we were talking about, and we want to look at this carefully, what's her play here? Is she toying with Gabriel? She clearly knows him and knows about his attitudes. And it's an interesting exchange because we're not sure. At times she seems quite sincere. Come, why don't you come with us? We'll go up to Western Ireland. But then at the same time, there seems to be this attitude she has where she knows he's going to refuse, and she's purposely trying to provoke him. All right, that's something we want to look at when we look carefully at this scene. Okay, so, and what draws me to that, of course, is this idea that it's abruptly, right? It sets a tone. It's abrupt. I have a crow to pluck with you, with me. Of course, again, be attentive to the way Gabriel reacts and how he responds to being put into what at least he perceives to be an uncomfortable situation. With me, and she nodded her head, be attentive to every detail, gravely, very seriously. What is it? Asked Gabriel, smiling at her solemn manner. So we're seeing here the abruptness. She's nodding her head gravely, and she has a solemn manner. So we want to recognize that. It's a serious moment, conceivably, all right? And she asks, who is GC? Answered Miss Ivers, turning her eyes upon him. Who is GC? And now, immediately, right? So GC, at first we're saying, well, who is GC? Well, as we'll see, right? GC is the initials of Gabriel Conway, right? But it's not, why is she saying GC? We're going to find out. And Gabriel knows where she's going almost immediately, right? Because we see that Gabriel colored. We saw similarly as he did with Lily, and was about to knit his brow as if he did not understand. So he was about to play act like, what are you talking about? But we see that he does, because we see that he colored, right? He turns red, like he's been caught. And he was about to knit his brows as if he did not understand, right? But she's anticipating that, because then she says bluntly, oh, innocent Amy, I have found out that you write for the Daily Express. Now, aren't you ashamed of yourself? Now, for us, we're hit with two things here that we have to unpack. GC, we may not make that connection immediately, that GC is Gabriel Conway. And she's making an accusation of sorts, right? I have found out that you're writing for this particular newspaper, and you should be ashamed for it. So we have to, unpack that. Why should he be ashamed for writing for a paper called the Daily Express? And he asked that himself. He's almost voicing what we're asking. Why should I be ashamed of myself? And we're saying the same thing. Why should he be ashamed? Asked Gabriel. But no, blinking his eyes and trying to smile. Right? That's, you're blinking your eyes and you're trying to smile. He knows what she means. Right? He's aware of it, but he's trying to deny it. He's trying to hide from it. And this is a constant theme here of him trying to avoid having to look at things directly. Right? Remember, we talked about be attentive to any mention of eyes and seeing and awareness. Well, I'm ashamed of you, said Miss Ivers, frankly. To say you'd write for a paper like that, I didn't think you were, and we talked about this in class, a West Briton, right? A derogatory term for an Irishman who has sympathies for England. Remember, keeping in mind that England is the colonial force, if you will, that is controlling Ireland, right? That's what Parnell's movement for home rule was all about, was to break free from that control, seeking independence from the British. To be accused of being a West Briton, if you're an Irishman, to be accused of that is to say your sympathies lie with Britain more than they do with Ireland. And as we see, it's a very apt designation for Gabriel, not just for his sympathies with Britain, as much as it is his turning his back on Ireland. A look of perplexity appeared on Gabriel's face. It was true that he wrote, now, this is Gabriel. We're seeing how Gabriel is trying to navigate through this, try to rationalize his way out of it. So he's defending himself here, right? A look of perplexity appeared on Gabriel's face. It was true that he wrote a literary column every Wednesday in the Daily Express, for which he was paid 15 shillings, right? So you can see this as an attempt to, well, what are you talking about? How does that make me a West Briton? What's wrong with writing for the Daily Express? But we already know that he, at some level, recognizes why Miss Ivers is making these accusations. We saw this up here when he's coloring, right? And the way that he trying to pretend like he doesn't understand. He does understand. But here he's going to slip into an attempt to rationalize. But that did not make him a West Briton. Surely the books he received for review were almost more welcome than the paltry check. I'm not doing it for the money. I'm a scholar. I'm an academic. He loved to feel the covers and turn over the pages of newly printed books. Nearly every day when his teaching in the college was ended, he used to wander down the quays to the secondhand booksellers, to Hickey's on Bachelor's Walk, to Webb's or Massey's on Aston's Quay, or to O'Clohissey's in the by street, right? All part of his attempts to rationalize. I'm only doing this because I love books. I'm not doing this for any political reason. I'm not doing this for anything other than the joy of being able to be exposed to more books. He did not know how to meet her charge, right? So he's putting up a front here that is an attempt to diminish and dismiss Miss Ivers' claim. He wanted to say that literature was above politics. An arguable point. But they were friends for many years standing, and their careers had been parallel, right? So this is important, as I was mentioning earlier. This is someone who was on equal footing with Gabriel. We've certainly had the sense that Gabriel certainly perceives himself and is perceived by others as in an elevated position, a superior position because of his education, knowledge. The sisters are looking for him to take control of things. We're going to see how he also is. He's the one who carves the goose, sits at the head of the table. He's the one giving the speech. And remember, this party every year. Okay? And pretty much what transpires here seems to be a very much in part of a routine. Gabriel's always asked to carve the goose. Gabriel's always giving a speech. This is a tradition, if you will, a routine that goes happens every year. And he has this position of, to some extent, authority and superiority. Certainly his attitude, remember when he's talking about, oh, they won't understand when I'm making references to Browning's poetry. That'll be too much for them. It wouldn't be too much for Miss Ivors. So we're already getting a sense, just by when we see that the careers had been parallel, that she is removed from the rest of the partygoers, just as Gabriel is removed. All right. And as we'll find out, she also then physically removes herself from the party before his speech, before the dinner. Right? She is the anomaly here. If we're looking at the party and the guests at the party as a representation, this microcosmic representation of Irish society, the Irish society that is being critiqued to some degree, Gabriel seems to stand outside of it to some degree, as does Miss Ivors, and Miss Ivors much more prominently. As a result, we know that as a result of this exchange that we're about to see here, no one else jumps in to voice her ideas concerning the importance of Ireland. It mainly, one gets the sense, because it's not the kind of things that the other guests think about. It's the type of things that Gabriel thinks about, the types of things that Miss Ivors thinks about, right? Careers, because they've had parallel careers, first at the university and then as teachers, right? Academics. He could not risk a grandiose phrase with her, okay? So let's look at this again. But they were friends of many years standing, and their careers had been parallel, first at the university and then at the as teachers. He could not risk a grandiose phrase with her. He could with all the others, right? He could skate out of this situation by using his perceived superior intellect and language abilities with some grandiose phrase and get out of it, like he did with Lily. Not that he used any grandiose phrases there. He just tossed money and ran. But he's looking for a way out, because he recognizes he doesn't have total control here. He has that control when he gives the speech. It's his speech. He has that control when he's sitting at the head of the table. We see how the sisters are, Gabriel, you have to look after Freddie, right? We turn to you to maintain the control, to control Freddie and his drinking. That is what Gabriel is comfortable with. His sense of being in control where no one will challenge him. What he does not respond well to is being challenged. He continued blinking his eyes and trying to smile, right? We saw that up here. And murmured lamely that he saw nothing political in writing reviews of books. So here's where, when in this part where he's a little more, or his thoughts, his ideas as we're being told them, is a little more assertive. You know, what's wrong with me doing this? I'm not doing it for any nefarious reason. I'm doing it because I like books. But here, he murmured lamely. So when he tries to vocalize what he's thinking in his head, how to defend himself, it comes out lamely as a murmur, where he tries to say he saw nothing political in writing reviews of books, which strongly suggests that he knows quite well that the Daily Express is a newspaper that is closely associated with England. That's how Miss Ivors has arrived at her conclusion, that he's a West Briton. That and other things. We certainly get the sense of Miss Ivors, because as it's revealed to us, they know each other well. So Miss Ivors has a very good handle on this dimension of Gabriel, arguably more of a handle on it than maybe Gabriel does himself. Again, we're looking at this in terms of trying to discover an Irish identity as a nation, and the individual sense of identity as we see in Gabriel's coming to awareness. The two identities are linked here. When their turn to cross had come, he was still perplexed and inattentive. He's perplexed, right, uncomfortable, and now he's inattentive. He doesn't want to deal with this. He's not going to pay attention. He doesn't want to have to defend himself. He doesn't want to have this conversation because it's not a conversation that he can control. He's dealing with an equal here. And it's much easier for him to deal with people when he perceives himself as being superior, and in certain respects, perhaps with his grandiose phrasing and so on, is, right? We saw that with Lily. But he doesn't handle that well either. Whenever it's not the way he anticipates, he becomes inattentive and wants to get away. Miss Ivers promptly took his hand in a warm grasp and said in a soft, friendly tone. Now, this is where it gets interesting in terms of what do we make of Miss Ivers. So she comes out blasting, right, aggressively. You know, you're a West Briton. I mean, aren't you ashamed of yourself? And we're seeing he continues to blink and try to smile, and he's murmuring. She knows he's uncomfortable, right? So our first reaction to this could be, oh, she is trying to, calm him down. They're friends, right? They've known each other for years. And she says, of course, I was only joking. Come, we cross now. So, one of the things we have to ask ourselves, is this sincere? Because look how quickly it changes again. When they were together again, she spoke of the university question, and Gabriel felt more at ease. Okay, so I was only joking, come on, let's cross. And then they are speaking about the university, right? Something that is not political, it's not personal, it's about work and so on. And Gabriel immediately feels more at ease. A friend of hers had shown her his review of Browning's poems. Remember, Browning is what he feels he can't bring up in his speech because this segment of the society would not be able to understand what he's talking about. They wouldn't be able to understand Browning. But Miss Ivers can. Right? And this segment, very low representation here at the party of Miss Ivers and Gabriel, right? Teachers, university educated, do know who Browning is. And she references the review of Browning's poem. That was how she'd found out the secret. But she liked the review immensely. Right? So she's almost as if she's flattering him. And acknowledging that he knows his Browning. He is an intellectual, as she is. But then she said, suddenly. Okay, so another shift. Oh, Mr. Conroy, will you come for an excursion to the Aran Isles this summer? So the shift here, we're alerted to a shift because it's sudden, but it's not a return to what she was doing up here, which seemed quite aggressive and really flustered Gabriel. It's now an invitation. And the invitation is to the west of Ireland, the Aran Isles. Right? Now, again, one of the questions we're asking, is she asking this knowing what his answer is going to be? And therefore is just goading him? We're going to stay there a whole month. It will be splendid out in the Atlantic. You ought to come. Mr. Clancy is coming, and Mr. Kilkelly, and Kathleen Kearney. It would be splendid. No, what she does here, for Greta too, if she'd come. She's from Connacht, isn't she? Now, again, there's nothing here to indicate that there's a lack of sincerity at this point. Would you come with us? We're going to be spending a month in the west of Ireland at the Aran Isles, and our colleagues, presumably colleagues, you ought to come because Clearly, these are mutual friends, Mr. Clancy, Mr. Kelly, Kathleen Kearney. It'll be fun. Oh, and you know, your wife, Greta, would love it too. Isn't she? Isn't she from there? Connacht would be near the Aaron House. It's in the west. And immediately this troubles Gabriel. Now, again, one of the other things we're looking at specifically is Gabriel's relationship with women and his interactions with women. We saw that with Lily. We're seeing that with Miss Ivers. And of course, Greta is his wife. What kind of relationship does he have with her? That's going to be very much the focus of the third part of the story. But again, note his reaction. Isn't she, you know, from Connacht? And his response is, her people are. And you note how he says it. He says it shortly, right? Almost angrily. Her people are, not her. Not her. Her people are. Right? So there's certainly the sense we get from this is he doesn't want to accept the fact that his wife grew up in that part of Ireland, rural Ireland, right? Remember, he's all about sophistication. And that's why he looks to the continent. And if he's in Ireland, he lives in Ireland, he's going to be living in the city. At least the city is better than the rural backwardness of the West, God forbid, of Ireland. And he has difficulty even acknowledging and accepting that that's where his wife comes from. And he's, you know, suggesting here that, you know, she's no longer part of those people. Her people, she's still part of them, but she is not, right, closely associated with them. It's her people, not her. A very important distinction. According to him, does Greta feel the same way about the West? Well, we don't know at this point, but we're getting it just Gabriel's aversion to it. But she continues, Miss Ivers, right? But you will come, won't you? Said Miss Ivers, laying her warm hand eagerly on his arm. So again, this is coming across as sincere, seemingly. And now we're going to see Gabriel try to hum and haw his way out of this, right? Well, the fact is, Gabriel, I have just arranged to go. Now watch how Miss Ivers interacts here. So it's a warm hand, and she's eager. She seems sincere. You know, come with us out to the West. But you will come, won't you? It'll be fun. The fact is, said Gabriel, I have just arranged to go. And then she cuts him off. Go where? Well, you know, every year I go for a cycling tour. I go for a cycling tour with some fellows. And so, but where? Now, it's a very, you know, distinct shift here. All this warmness where she was drawing them out, putting them at ease, right? Diffusing the intensity that was caused by her initial aggressiveness. She's diffused it, and now he's, you know, she's kind of, you know, come out west. He's starting to explain why he wouldn't, and she's interrupting him. She's, you know, she's goading him. You know, but where? Pushing her finger in his chest. But where? Huh? Huh? Well, we usually go to France or Belgium or perhaps Germany. Of course, that's revealing to us he doesn't go on vacation in Ireland. He goes to the continent. France, Belgium, Germany. And Miss Ivers, and why do you go to France and Belgium, said Miss Ivers, instead of visiting your own land? So there's a strong suggestion here that this was all, this whole middle part of Miss Ivers's discussion with Gabriel, where she becomes warm and friendly, might not have been as sincere as it came across. Right? Gabriel reacts as if she's sincere. He's put at ease. But now she gets aggressive again, almost as if she was setting him up. Why do you go to France and Belgium instead of visiting your own land? Well, said Gabriel, it's partly to keep in touch with the languages. Right now he's doing what he was doing over here. Right? He's justified. Oh, there's nothing wrong with, I'm not doing it in any way to make a comment about Ireland. I go there for the languages and partly for a change. Sounds rational, sounds reasonable. And then Miss Ivers, haven't you your own language to keep in touch with? Irish? Asked Miss Ivers. And you can now, Gabriel is, because he's being goaded, he's going to respond. Well, said Gabriel, if it comes to that, Irish is not my language. Now, this is an important moment because it's revealing to us his disdain, to a certain extent, for things Irish. A big part of the Home Rule movement, a big part of Irish nationalism revolved around the rejuvenation, if you will, of the Irish language. Because they're speaking English. And the English language for Irish nationalists, of course, is the language of the oppressor. And there was a strong movement among certain intellectual circles. I mentioned this in class. The literary revival movement, to find subject matter and themes for art, theater, poetry in the history and culture of Ireland itself, rather than mimicking or pursuing those voices, artistic voices, cultural voices that are on the continent in France and Belgium and Germany. The avant-garde, where it's happening. We need to find it here. There's as much here in Ireland as there is out there in terms of finding proper subjects for discussion and exploration in the arts. And part of it as well was to elevate the language, to return to the language, to not let the language disappear. The language being a representation of that culture, the Irish culture. So when he is stipulating Irish is not my language, he is disassociating himself dramatically from Irish history and Irish culture. And of course, at this point, their neighbors, right, remember, they're on the dance floor, had turned to listen to the cross-examination. Okay, so now we're getting a further sense that this was, if not a setup, it's still very much a contentious discussion. Gabriel glanced right and left nervously, right? He doesn't mind necessarily being the center of attention, but for the right reasons. Not when he's being challenged. He does not respond to challenge. He needs to be in control. And tried to keep his good humor under the ordeal which was making a blush invade his forehead. This has now become an ordeal because she is challenging his attitudes towards culture and art, literature, and everything that culture entails as to where to find it and how to pursue it. And she continues, and haven't you your own land to visit? Why are you going to visit other lands when you haven't even visited your own land? And haven't you your own land to visit that you know nothing of? Your own people and your own country? Again, strongly suggesting that Gabriel has turned his back on Ireland, but he's Irish, and is rationalizing his excursions to the continent as a means by which to improve the languages, its culture, his education, and to learn more, right? They're about learning. They're teachers and academics. It's all about the acquisition of knowledge, to have a better understanding of the world, and ipso facto, a better understanding of the self. Can you understand the world you are in, the world around you, if you do not have an understanding of yourself and your own roots and your own identity? If you're wearing a mask, if you're hiding from your true self, if you're not willing to delve in and look at who you really are and everything that entails, because we are very much a product of our environment, right? And where we come from, our history. And Gabriel is ignoring it. And she's calling him out on it. Don't you have your own land to visit? You know nothing, and that you know nothing of. You don't know Ireland. That's one of the problems. You have this, we talked about this in class, and we'll return to this idea when there is conversations, we'll see it later on when Gabriel is giving his speech, that the conversations about Ireland are a look to the past in a nostalgic way. It's all about the nostalgia for the past. It's not to learn from the past. It's to reflect in this nostalgic manner. Oh, those were the good old days. All right. And when you look at the past in that sense, without looking to learn from the past and to draw on the richness of that past as a means by which to have a better understanding of the present, which then allows for a development of an idea for the future, a course of action, and the trajectory in which you want to move forward. You can't have that if it's just a nostalgic view of the past. It's a romanticizing of the past. It's not a full understanding or appreciation of those roots. And that is what is suggested here in the way that Miss Ivory says that you know nothing of your own people and your own country. You don't know anything about it. Right? This is all you know of your country, this party. And what is this party? What's going on here? It's part of a routine. Remember, we talked about that circular routine over and over again. You do not make progress this way. You're just going round and round and round. You glance back to the past for the nostalgia of it. And then you're going to come back next year, he's going to give a similar speech. And next year he'll be asked to carve the goose again. And nothing will change. The only direction you have in this environment is not towards greater self-awareness and progress as an individual and as a cultural entity. When you are stuck within the parameters of that circle, just going round and round and round and not moving, and you're stagnated and you're paralyzed, there's only one thing that you can anticipate that's going to change, that make a change in this pattern. We get the sense from most of the other people at the party are quite content to stay in this routine. This is fine for them. They're not the educated teachers who are looking to move forward. They like it here very much. Thank you very much. But when you're in there and there is no looking forward, there's only one thing that you can anticipate in terms of change: the inevitability of death. Brings us back to the title. And Gabriel confirms it, right? So nothing of your own people and your own country. You don't know anything. And oh, to tell you the truth, retorted Gabriel suddenly, he's angry. I'm sick of my own country. Sick of it. He repeats it, sick of it, twice. Why? We're asking that question. Why are you sick of your own country, Gabriel? And of course, Miss Ivers asks it. Why? Gabriel did not answer, for his retort had heated him. He's angry. And she asked him, why? Why are you sick of your country? Why don't you want to know more about your country? Why do you hate your country? Why are you insisting that Irish is not your language? They had to go visiting together, and as he had not answered, Miss Ivers said warmly, of course, you have no answer. Now, and he doesn't. Why? Gabriel tried to cover his agitation by taking part in the dance with great energy. He's running away from it. Yeah, he's agitated. I need to get away from this. He avoided her eyes, for he had seen a sour expression on her face. But when they met in the long chain, he was surprised to feel his hand firmly pressed. She looked at him from under her brows for a moment quizzically, until he smiled. She's putting him back at ease. Then just as the chain was about to start again, she stood on tiptoe and whispered into his ear, West Britain. It's really an extraordinary scene. It's so revealing, and yeah, this I've already gone for almost an hour, but and we've covered things in class that have gone beyond this, and I think that will be by reviewing this and going through this scene in such detail, it will allow you to reflect on the things that we've discussed in class that happened later at during his speech about that nostalgia for the past. And I think it really helps to prepare in many ways for what's coming in Act 3. What's important to remember here is, yes, all this discussion about Gabriel not wanting to know his own land, his own people, his own language, his people, his land. Can he truly know himself if he doesn't know where he comes from? So while we have this encapsulation of a paralyzed society that is living within the confines of this circular routine life, most content to do so, the other people of the party are not interested in galoshes. They're not interested in what is the new thing, whether it's the new fashion or whether it's the new literature and art. The masses, represented by the other guests at the party, are not interested in those things. The intellectuals, the elite, if you will, represented by Miss Ivers and Gabriel, and they are the ones who can bring that awareness, the cultural and so on, to the masses, in a sense, the way that Gabriel tries to bring the galoshes to the masses. They're not going to find it on their own. This is not what they concern themselves with. The ants are more concerned with, if Freddie's going to be drunk, and that their party, the same party that they have year after year after year, goes well. It's Gabriel who expresses an interest in wanting something more. And Miss Ivers expresses the same interest in wanting something more than just this routine existence. And Miss Ivers is saying, I need to get in touch with my land and my people and my language to learn more about myself and my people, land, and language, in order to then find the proper means by which to recognize and realize that thing which is more. Gabriel is looking, by looking outside of Ireland for that thing which is more, is neglecting himself. And without a full awareness of yourself, then you will never be able to fully recognize anything outside of yourself. Very important to keep that in mind as things unfold. Right, Miss Ivers, this moment here is brought to fruition. It's not just about Ireland, right, and these things that we've been talking about in terms of Irish history and culture. It's about Gabriel, equally about Gabriel, if not more about Gabriel. And now we need to be watching carefully how Gabriel's behavior is reflected here, reflected as we proceed, how Gabriel's behavior reflects this idea that he's missing something. He's running away from things. And by running away from them, he's not able to face them, absorb them, and learn from them in order to grow, in order to have greater understanding of who he actually is. He thinks he knows who he is, but whenever he's challenged, he runs, he hides, and then he positions himself in an environment, this stagnated Irish society, where he isn't challenged. He plays it safe. And by playing it safe, he's limiting his ability to grow. He's limiting his perspective. All right. We talked about this. This is, again, just to remind you, I just want to cover this and then I'll wrap this up here. He reflects on this. Let's just, again, take a look at this bit, and then I know, because I don't want to go too long here. Glasgow memory of unpleasant. Okay, so while her tongue rambled, right, I think that's Freddie's mother, right? Gabriel tried to banish from his mind. He's trying, literally, banish from his mind all memory of the unpleasant incident with Miss Ivers. Again, do away with it. I don't want to deal with this. I want it to be completely gone, just like I wanted Lily to be completely gone. That's why I ran away from her. But when you run away from things, when you banish things, then you can never know in what way they are significant. It's a cowardly approach. Of course, the girl or woman or whatever she was, okay, look at this. He's now diminishing her, dismissing her. He has to, just like he dismissed Lily. He has to bring her down so that the weight of what she said can be dismissed. There is no weight to it. She's just a girl or whatever she was. All right. Of course, she was an enthusiast, but there was a time for all things. He's now falling back into that rationalization. A rationalization that is designed in his mind to dismiss anything that challenges him. Anything that would ask him to think a little more carefully. He's in a bubble, and he doesn't want anyone to take him out of that bubble. But that bubble is so limiting. If you stay in the bubble, you can never truly know things. But there was a time for all things. Perhaps he ought not to have answered her like that. But she had no right to call him a West Briton before people. even as a joke. Was she joking? And note his concern before people. Remember, we talked about this. He has a tremendous ego. It's an ego, though, that is predicated on limited understanding. Right? He thinks very highly of himself, mainly because others flatter him. Well, who's flattering him? Not what he conceives or perceives to be his equals. The only one here who is seemingly his equal is Miss Ivers. And she doesn't flatter him. She rips him apart. He doesn't want that. He wants to be put on the pedestal. He wants to be at the top of the table, carving. He wants to be the one to give the speech. That he's comfortable with, because then he's not challenged, and then he doesn't have to explore these things. As we'll see in the third part, he's going to, and remember, I told you, watch the structure of the story, how it keeps building towards that. He's not going to be able to dismiss it or banish it when it is as intimate as it is and will be with his wife. Before, and again, always before people, appearances, that's part of the ego, right? But again, if you are overly concerned with what other people are thinking of you, it usually is an indication of a lack of confidence in who you are. I know that's a bit of a generalization, but we want to look for that as a possible theme that will be more carefully unpacked as we proceed. She had tried to make him ridiculous before people, heckling him and staring at him with her rabbit eyes. He's not taking any responsibility in this. She had tried to make him look ridiculous, and a man like Gabriel cannot be made to look ridiculous. But he was the cause of that ridiculousness, if you will. But he will not accept his responsibility in it, staying in his bubble. It's got to be someone else's fault. It's her fault. She provoked. Right? She had tried to make me look ridiculous before people. Right? She was heckling him and staring at him with her rabbit eyes. So the heckling, all right, maybe, was she playing a game? Was she trying to lure him in and then hit him to make him look ridiculous? There's a suggestion of that in that scene. Right? That's what I was saying before. What is she really up to? But then he loses his an urgency to his argument here, because there's heckling him and staring at him with her rabbit eyes. What is that? Just her eyes, rabbit-like eyes. He is saying she did that intentionally to make him feel ridiculous. Or was she doing it because they're friends in an attempt, through humiliation, to get him to see the light as she perceives the light? That you don't have to go out there, Gabriel. You're not going to find what you're looking for out there. You will only find it here, at home. He saw his wife making her way towards him through the waltzing couples. When she reached him, she said into his ear. Now note here, right, after he's having this discussion in his head about how it's all Miss Ivers' fault, and he's not taking on any responsibility for what happened in that encounter, structurally in the story, his wife appears, another woman. The woman, presumably, that he is the closest to of all the women he's going to encounter here. He saw his wife making her way towards him through the waltzing couples. When she reached him, she said into his ear, Gabriel, Aunt Kate wants to know, won't you carve the goose as usual? Perfect thing to say to him, right? Brings him back into that perceived status of, I carved the goose, I'm the head of the table. Miss Daly will carve the ham and I'll do the pudding. All right, said Gabriel. She's sending in the young ones first as soon as this waltz is over so that we'll have the table to ourselves. The children will eat at the children's table, right? You know, standard stuff. Very much, though, revealing the standard behavior of this community, routine. Were you dancing? Asked Gabriel. Of course I was. Didn't you see me? Right. So little things that you want to be attentive to. Of course I was. Didn't you see me? Weren't you, paying attention? I'm your wife. And then immediately segueing into, what row did you have with Miss Ivers? No row. Why? Did she say so? That sense of insecurity. Something like that. I'm trying to get that Mr. Darcy to sing. He's full of conceit, I think. Right? So she's changing the subject. Why? Did she say so? Something like that. Right? Something like it's almost as an afterthought because you can see her, looking around. I'm trying to get that Mr. Darcy to sing. He's full of conceit, I think. She's changing the subject, suggesting that this business with Miss Ivers is not that important to her. Did you have a fight with Miss Ivers? Yeah, that's what she's saying. By the way, I want to get Mr. Darcy to sing with us, but he won't let it go. There was no row, said Gabriel moodily. Only she wanted me to go for a trip to the west of Ireland, and I said I wouldn't. That brings Greta right back. His wife clasped her hands excitedly and gave a little jump. Oh, do go, Gabriel, she cried. I'd love to see Galway again. Remember when Miss Ivers said your Greta, your wife would like it. Isn't she from there? Her people are from there. Well, we're certainly getting a sense that she would be quite pleased to go there, right? And there's a sense that when we jump back to what Gabriel said earlier, well, her people are from there. She's not from there. She wouldn't want to go. I know what my wife would like, and she wouldn't want to go. Well, he's wrong. And that's important to remember as we get to the third part. How well does Gabriel know his wife? How well does Gabriel understand his limited understanding of his wife, if you will? And that ties into you can't know others until you know yourself. And note how dismissive he gets. Oh, do go, Gabriel. I'd love to see Galway again. You can go if you like, Gabriel said coldly. She looked at him for a moment, then turned to Miss Maylands and said, there's a nice husband for you, Mrs. Maylands. This little bit here, which is has a direct link to what we were looking at in the encounter with Miss Ivers, is another means by which the discussion of Ireland and Irish nationalism and Irish identity as a country, as a nation, but also the individuals who are part of that nation, is melded and fused to Gabriel's own sense of identity. And coupled with the very uncomfortable and agitated sensibility that Gabriel develops when he's around, particularly women. This is his wife, and she berates him. There's a nice husband for you, right? Telling me I can go. Go if you like. I'm not going. So we're getting this very mixed view of Gabriel. On the one hand, everyone seems to revere him and his intellect and his culture and his galoshes, and yet we're seeing all this being picked apart. We saw it very distinctly with Miss Ivers, and we've seen it before with his wife when she kind of laughs at him about the galoshes. What kind of relationship does Gabriel have with his wife? That becomes a key question. And a question that we will pursue as we continue reading the story. Okay, so you should have finished the story by now. There is more to talk about in the second section, especially regarding his speech. We touched on that though, so we can review that. But when we meet next in class, we will be pursuing the events that transpire in that third part. But you cannot fully appreciate what happens in the third part unless you've really absorbed all the nuances and the interconnectivity of these things that are being discussed in the first two parts, and in particular, Gabriel's character. All right, I will see you all in class.